Trent Dilfer, decade and a half in the NFL, was in 6 playoff games in his life, 5-1 in those playoff games. You know, it is interesting because when you were in Tampa was, I covered it. It was kind of a mess as an organization. And sometimes when an organization doesn't have great history or people's jobs are on the line, they're much more willing to go for it. And where the Packers or the Colts, as you know, Trent, they've had success, it can drive you nuts as a player, but they're not chasing anything, right? So I kind of feel like Chicago's going to go all in on this thing. Do you think Carson Wentz is worth 2 first-round picks and spending that? Do you think he is?
I don't. I agree with you 100%. The psychology of this situation, in fact, all this quarterback carousel is fascinating. I think you're right. I think Chicago has to panic. They have to knee-jerk react to this. They will probably offer more than they need to get Carson Wentz, where you nailed it perfectly with Indy. There's some other good quarterbacks out there that they probably feel just as good about. You mentioned Sam Darnold. When you have the infrastructure that the Colts have, the offensive line, the runner, the skill position guys, the offensive staff, you're not going to panic. You're not going to make a knee-jerk reaction and give up too much for a player that does have a high ceiling. I'm with you. I think the Bears have to. They're the little brother in the division. They have to make this type of splash hire for 2 reasons. One, they got to be relevant again, and you said it. They got to save their jobs, and draft picks for Ryan Pace aren't as important because he knows he's got to win right now or he's out the door.
You know, I said this about J.J. Watt. I do believe symbolism matters and momentum matters. And it's the old crowded bar theory. Nobody wants to walk down the street in New York with your wife and go into a bar where there's nobody in it, right? You want some juice. You want some energy. You want fun, right? You want to be part of the cheers bar. Everybody's got a good joke. And so I look at Green Bay and I think they could use a little momentum. Tampa feels right now, oh, my God, I'd take a pay cut and go play in Tampa. I got no state tax. The weather's good. Brady's rolling. Look how good Fournette did. I don't like people reacting to other teams, but I do feel like, Trent, Green Bay needs to create a little inertia here, right?
I hate agreeing with you on everything you bring up, but I'm on board with you here as well. I think Green Bay has to overspend, make a splash free agent acquisition. I think with all the stuff that came out at the end of the season with Aaron being disgruntled with certain things, I think you need to add momentum. You need to be part of the offseason conversation. You're not going to be part of this offseason conversation as it relates to quarterbacks, and that's going to dominate now to the draft and post-draft. So interject yourself in the conversation with a J.J. Watt signing, with another splash free agent signing. Go outside your comfort zone. The Packers haven't done this typically. Why can't you do it now? I don't think you're this close from getting to a Super Bowl. You know you got to beat Tampa. You're going to need some difference makers, and I think J.J. Watt can be that difference maker.
Were you surprised last week that Mr. Go Hawks, Russell Wilson, was actually outspoken on personnel, offensive line? It's not his personality type. I can theorize why he did it, but were you surprised, Trent, he did it?
I was, because he has such a great relationship with the organization, and you kind of don't air your dirty laundry out to the public after the season. He must be really, really upset, and I think he's justified to be upset. I was surprised that he went public with it. Think about if you're Russ. You know, he went from cooking, and the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season, he's the clear favorite for MVP. He's putting up numbers that are, making our jaw drop. Defense is struggling, and then all of a sudden, they kind of transition back to bully ball, try to get the defense to play better. All of a sudden, he goes from cooking to being put in the freezer drawer, turn around and hand the ball off on first and second down all the time, having to play on third down without a great offensive line. He's watching what's going on around the league. When Tom Brady has more weapons at his disposal, he knows what to do with a great young offensive line. And you got to be sitting there going, wait a second, why isn't my team doing this for me? So I can understand why Russell's upset. Now, I love Pete's formula. I don't think he's wrong for doing this, but the quarterback isn't going to be the lead dog all the time, and that happened. We saw that happen midseason where they made a definitive shift from being quarterback-driven, offensive-driven, to going back to being defensive-driven and run the ball more and really take the ball out of Russell's hand.
It's interesting. I was talking to a friend the other day, and he said, listen, he goes, you media guys are getting all fired up on Matt Stafford. He says, but he's not an overly mobile quarterback. He is a pocket guy. That's what Goff was. He's been banged up. Forget about the insinuation was, we've always sort of understood until Brady, it takes 2 years. You get into a system, you get comfortable in a system, it becomes rote. You don't have to think about it. This idea that Matt Stafford solves a dilemma, my friend pushed back and said, well, show me the wins. Why are you guys all into this? So what's your takeaway on that?
Yeah, I think it's both. I think both things are. I mean, one, we just saw a unicorn, right? We just saw a total aberration and Tom Brady going year one with no OTAs, with no summer football, with a bunch of new people, take them to a championship. That's not going to happen with anybody else. However, I do think Stafford brings an element that your friend isn't recognizing, and that's his ability to play in conflict. Jared really struggled in conflict. When it wasn't right, when it wasn't on rhythm, when the pocket wasn't right, he struggled. Stafford's made a career out of putting up big numbers under conflict. And you don't have to be mobile, you just have to be comfortable in conflict. And I bet you that is what McVay and the rest of the personnel department saw with Stafford, is the upgrade there is they don't have to be right all the time, and Stafford can make them right. I love Jared Goff. I think he's going to do really well over time in Detroit. But I do think if you're the Rams and you're trying to get in this mix right now, right? You're looking at Green Bay, you're looking at Tampa, and you're saying those are the teams. Then I do think Matthew Stafford gives you a little edge in trying to compete with those two teams because of how he deals with conflict.
So the Super Bowl's done. It's in the books. I was surprised. I didn't think they'd win at Lambeau. I thought it was a win for coaching. I want to talk specifically about the offensive line because I said, when you look at, as you well know, from the days you were there, Tampa's special teams have been a wreck, and they've never had a great O-line. This offensive line was kind of a bunch of guys. Jensen's a good center. Wirfs was a rookie. It was just guys. It was like when a year ago, 8 months ago, we were like, God, is the offensive line good enough for Tom? And then I watch him in the playoffs, and I'm like, oh, my God, it feels like a dominating unit. What does Brady do, either pre-snap, situationally, what did he do to elevate this unit? Because I thought their last 3 games, they were a dominant offensive line, and they were not in September, and they were not last year.
I think there's a couple elements to it. Number one, anybody that devalues the X's and O's in the NFL doesn't know what they're talking about. Yes, Willies and Joes are important, but X's and O's going along with those Willies and Joes is what makes them reach their potential. And I think there was a definitive change for the Bucs with what they did up front. They went from trying to do everything to only a few things really well. Started with the run game. They really simplified their run game. They ran a lot of inside zone, a lot of duo, and then versions off of that. So the offensive line got to do the same things over and over and over. And then they added a really, really robust play action pass game off of those base runs to keep the protection assignment simple. And then the pass game, you asked me what Brady does. He makes subtle little changes to make sure they have help. So when you call a pass protection, it's like, say we're sliding left. Well, you can slide left or you can slide semi-left and give your guard center a little more help if you know the edge defender isn't coming. So how he manipulates the protections at the line of scrimmage so that they have help. They also added some tight ends and backs inserting on their way out for some help, thumps and chips and things like that to help out the tackles and inside players. So there was a definite plan from the coaching staff and Tom Brady to make sure that the offensive line was going to go from struggling to thriving late in the year. And they did it through X's and O's, simplifying some things and all getting on the same page. And it's really the way great offensive lines roll. When great offensive lines get on the same page, you maximize each player on that offensive line. They start playing better together because they're practicing the same stuff day in and day out. Now by midseason, end of season, you're rolling and they're thinking each other's thoughts. And you talk to any great offensive line, when they start thinking each other's thoughts, they have their own little offensive line language. When they start, speaking their offensive line language to one another and reading each other's minds, they become a great unit, and that's what happened with the Bucs.
Good stuff, Trent Dilfer. The next 6 weeks for us are slower in terms of sports. The NFL ends. We got about 6 weeks before free agency. And, it's funny, Trent. I wrap a bow on the NFL season because I didn't talk last week. And I look at it, and it's always been a copycat league. But I do like the increased power of the quarterbacks, voicing their opinions, the ability to move from franchise to franchise. You didn't grow up in this. I hate the franchise tag. I think it's awful for quarterbacks to get trapped. And I got to tell you, I look at this year, the year of quarterback empowerment. That's how I kind of see it, that, you know what? They get a voice. They get an opinion. Maybe it was Tommy-led, but that's kind of, when I look at the season, that kind of sticks to me. Is there anything, Rapabone, at you that sticks out to you this year?
I'm shocked the quality of football without the offseason programs, and I'll parlay what you just said right there. I don't think you have to be done talking about the NFL. Park Avenue's still going to win up until the draft because all we're going to be doing is talking about quarterbacks. You'd rather talk about quarterbacks than the NBA or hockey. I'm pretty confident of that. You have Watson, you got Darnold, you got Carr, you have Wilson now. Then you have 4 guys in college football that are going to be really good pros, and Lawrence, Fields, Wilson, and Lance. So we're going to be talking quarterbacks ad nauseum here for the next 6 weeks. It's not going away, and everybody's going to listen because everybody wants to know about the quarterback. And I agree with you. They're more empowered now than they've ever been.
Yeah, good stuff, Trent. Good seeing you. We'll talk soon.
See you, brother.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.